we'll just start. Let's begin. Okay, so we learned yesterday about the differences between the reason of why Reb Meir holds that you can't use an animal as a wall for a sukkah. Why can't you use an animal as a wall for a sukkah? So there were two explanations of Reb Meir why it's a problem. Again, Reb Yehuda argued. Reb Yehuda said it's kosher. You could use an animal as a wall for a sukkah. But Reb Meir said it's not kosher. It's not valid. Question is, so what was the reason of Reb Meir?
Because it moves. Okay. I'm sorry.
The
I thought you were
reason.
asking a question. Sorry.
Moshe, are you asking something?
No. I thought you were asking a question. It's because
No.
it moves.
Okay.
The animal
No
will
problem.
move, or if it dies.
Okay, no problem. So the Gemara gave two reasons. One was Abaye and one was Reb Zera. Abaye said the reason why Reb Meir says you can't use an animal as a wall for a sukkah is because Abaye said we're afraid the animal's going to die, and you're going to end up not having a kosher sukkah, and you won't realize it'll be a problem. So don't use it in the first place. Don't use an animal. Reb Zera says we're afraid that the animal's going to run away. So the conclusion of the Gemara was that if you hold you're afraid an animal might die, you have to be concerned and take extra precaution. So for sure you should be concerned the animal might run away. Of course, that's every minute of an animal's life they're always running away. So if you're afraid that you're concerned and you're taking precaution against an animal might die, and what are you going to do? And the sukkah won't be kosher, and you'll be stuck without a kosher sukkah. So in that scenario, basically we understand. Okay, you're concerned about the animal dying. For sure, you got to be concerned that the animal will run away. But the other opinion that says we're afraid the animal will run away doesn't necessarily agree with the problem that the animal might die. You got to be more of a nervous. You don't have to take such precautions. You know what I mean? What are you going to do if the car breaks down? Every time you drive, are you concerned the car is going to break down? So do you have to take that in consideration? So
with some cars,
wow.
Right? Some of us are old enough to remember that the cars, in the old days, you never knew if you were going to make it where you were.
Right.
But yes, the newer cars, thank God they were,
I'm old enough to remember that. But
yeah.
it also depended on the certain cars that were like known to be lemons. Yeah. But yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me, Masechta Yoma said about the Kohen Gadol that they prepared a backup wife, and then somebody suggested also prepare a backup for the backup, and then another sage replied, "If you do that, there's no end to it."
Right. Yeah. The Gemara is going to bring that actually. We'll see later. But
if the animal dies, is it a couple tumor, or that's just something you have to worry about for the schach?
Yeah, that's only a schach issue. The issue that we're dealing with is the fact that it dies. So depending on how big it is, it could be that it caused the sukkah not to be kosher anymore because it doesn't have a sufficient a wall. It's not sufficient to be a wall because if it dies, it falls down.
They have to clean up after the animals. Did they have to clean up because your sukkah you can't have excrement or whatever.
Smell. A bad smell.
So
right, but I guess that wouldn't ruin the sukkah moment for those, you know what I mean? In other words, just because you'd have to clean it up, it doesn't mean that you'd have to rebuild your sukkah afterwards. It would just be that
you would have to keep it clean. In other words, you would have to clean up.
Right. But I guess that's a different law than building your sukkah in a place that smells in the first place. You know what I mean? This sukkah is a kosher sukkah. Yeah. And the fact that there is going to be a moment that you will have to clean it up, I guess that doesn't affect the sukkah. to the kashrus of the sukkah. The issue that the Gemara is dealing with is that Rabbi Yehuda says there's nothing wrong with using an animal as a wall for a sukkah, and Rabbi Meir is going to say that there's a problem. And the problem of that Rabbi Meir, the reason of his that he's concerned is Gemara says two reasons. One is we're afraid it's going to run away. And the other is we're afraid that it's going to die. And the Gemara comes up with different scenarios. So one of the scenarios, what about an elephant? You want to use an elephant as a wall for a sukkah. And if the elephant is, let's say it's tied. So the Gemara says, well, if the elephant is tied, then even if it dies, it's going to still be sufficient for a wall, and it can't run away. So you got, according to all this, that would be everyone. Reb Meir, both of the explanations of Reb Meir would not apply in that case, and therefore Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda would agree that an elephant as a wall is kosher. There's nothing wrong with having an elephant as a wall for your sukkah. If it's tied down, even if it dies, it's going to be kosher. Even if it tries to run away, it can't run away. It's tied down, so it's going to be a kosher sukkah. And as Ezra told us, it won't even try to run. Now, what about if the elephant is not tied? So then initially the Gemara thought, oh, well, if it's not tied, then you have one of the reasons would apply, the other reason wouldn't apply. So it would be a machlokes, Abaye and Reb Zera.
Well, no, first stop here. The next one is a half an hour away.
Okay, let's mute everyone. So the animal is not tied. They have an elephant. So if it dies, it's going to still be a good wall because it'll just be in its place. It'll fall down a little, but it's still huge. So it'll still be a good wall. But the fact that it's not tied is a big problem. It could run away. So the Gemara says, well, if the reason is we're afraid it's going to run away, it's going to be not valid then. But if you're afraid it's going to die, then there's no problem, even if it dies. So it's kosher, according to that opinion. According to Abaye, it'll be kosher. But Reb Zera won't be a valid. So the Gemara says, but what do you mean? Even the one that holds that it's going to die also is nervous that it could run away. So even Abaye will agree that it's not going to be a kosher sukkah, even though if it dies, it's still going to be a kosher sukkah because it'll still be a wall, but it might run away, and that would be a reason why it shouldn't be a kosher sukkah. And so the Gemara says there must be another case where there would be a difference between these two interpretations, these two explanations. The Gemara comes up with a case that if it's just a regular animal that's tied, it's not an elephant. And in that case, behema kshura, it's an animal that's tied, it's not an elephant. In that case, so you have the problem of running away is not a problem, not going to apply. So according to that opinion that we're afraid it's going to run away, it can't really run away. It's tied down. So it's going to be a kosher sukkah. And Reb Meir would agree in such a case to Reb Yehuda that it's kosher. But according to Abaye's explanation, you're afraid it's going to die. So if you're nervous it's going to die, then it'll actually not be sufficient size for the wall, because if it dies, it falls down. And in that case, Abaye would explain Reb Meir that it's not a kosher sukkah. So this would be a case where there's a difference between Abaye's interpretation and Reb Zera's interpretation. Abaye's interpretation is we're nervous it's going to die. Here we do have to be concerned. Reb Zera's interpretation, we're nervous it's going to run away. It's not going to run away because it can't. It's tied down. Then the Gemara got involved with some of the technical aspects of how could an animal be a sukkah, be a kosher wall. There's going to be empty space there. It might be more than 3 handbreadths. It's not so simple to use an animal as a wall when it comes to all the laws that we've learned about mechitza, what constitutes a wall, and it has to be near the ground. You can't have 3 handbreadths of space from the ground and upward. So the Gemara says, yeah, you filled it in. you filled it in. Hutzadafna, two types of things that you filled it in with. I guess in those days it was very common to fill things in with these different types of branches and the palm branch and this other type of tree that we mentioned yesterday. The name of it, the Leray, something like that type of tree. I'm sorry, Leray, right? So anyway, so the Gemara says, okay, but what about this other problem? That okay, you filled it in, very nice. So it's a solid wall. It's sort of like solid now. The wall is more sturdy. It's filled. It's filled. I shouldn't say sturdy. It's filled. The wall is now filled because you filled it in with the branches. But what about the animal often crouches down? And then if it crouches down, you're gonna have a problem. You're counting this animal to be a 10 handbreadth animal to be a wall. If it crouches down, you're gonna lose your wall. So the Gemara says, yeah, you can't be talking about a regular case like that where it could just crouch down. We're talking about a case where you tied it, it must be that you tied it up that it's you can't crouch down because it's loaded like there's ropes holding it to a type of stand that it can't it's in a position that it can't crouch down. It's in a position that it can't crouch. What?
Good thing they didn't have those animal rights people around back
yeah,
then.
Exactly.
Back
California,
in Iraq somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so you have this animal tied now. So the Gemara says, okay, so the one opinion is we're afraid it's going to die. Now, other opinions we're afraid it's going to run away. So the Gemara gave a case where there's a difference between these two. The difference would be if it's tied down. But the Gemara says, but you still have a problem, could crouch. So the Gemara says, yeah, it must be tied. Oh, so now we have the animal. It's an animal. It's not an elephant. It's a regular size animal. It's tied down and it's tied up to that it can't crouch. And you filled in the hole, so you got pretty much. It could be a kosher. It could be a kosher sukkah. The only issue is the opinion that says we're afraid it's going to die. That's where you're going to have a problem. How could it die? What would be wrong if it dies? It's still going to be a wall because it's tied up, and it's going to stand in its position. My answer is yeah, there could be a difference. That if it dies, it still falls a little, and it will lose its rule of being a solid wall. In other words, you're right. You tied it up, but you can't tie it so perfectly that it's not going to, when it dies, it won't like fall or drop. And therefore, ultimately, it could go below the 7 handbreadth rule. In other words, the way it's situated at 7 handbreadths, the schach is at 10 handbreadths. So we consider that a solid wall because it's called loved. You have a space that's less than 3 handbreadths, it's considered attached. So if you have a solid 7 tfachim, 7 handbreadths, but the problem is what happens now? It died. So now it went, instead of 7 handbreadths high, it's now 6.5 handbreadths high. So it went down 2 inches or something because it died. And now it's still standing in its place because you tied it. But the fact is, once it dies, it's miskaves. Miskaves really means it like contracts a little. So I don't know if it means because it falls or because it after it dies there's some type of contraction that happens to the animal. But whatever it is, it ends up being not the sufficient size. So so that's what the Gemara says. And then what's going to happen is you're not going to realize this. And you're going to end up eating in there, and it's not going to be a kosher sukkah. And so, therefore, this is the explanation of the difference. This would be a difference between the two explanations of Reb Meir's opinion. Again, Reb Yehuda argues on this whole thing. Yehuda says we're not afraid of the fact that it's going to run away or the fact that that it could die. In other words, if Reb Zera is saying the reason is we're afraid it's going to run away, it seems that Reb Yehuda is not afraid of it. Why exactly is Reb Yehuda not afraid that it's going to run away. So seemingly, the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is a wall is a wall. You know, while it's here, it's a wall. The schach is sturdy. The wall is a wall. You want to make an extra gzeira that you're afraid that it's gonna run away. If it runs away, you'll know. Maybe something along those lines. In other words, I'm trying to explain Rabbi Yehuda's view. Where does Rabbi Yehuda come from? So to say that he's not afraid it's going to die, that's very easy, because it's a certain perspective. Do you have to cover such every scenario? Rameir here seems to say, yeah, we got to cover ourselves in case it's going to die. We got to be worried someone's not going to know, and it died, and it wasn't a sufficient size, and the sukkah is not going to be kosher, and then you're going to end up eating in a non-kosher sukkah. It's going to be too late. It's going to be Yom Tov, and you're going to be stuck without a sukkah. So Rameir has his concern. And you could understand Rabbi Yehuda really would argue on that and say, well, we don't have to be so overly concerned about it. Who says he's not going to know that it died? When it dies, it dies. Who says? So you don't have to make such an extra decree, maybe. So that's understandable. But the question of what about the fact that it's going to run away? What would Rabbi Yehuda hold? Why is Rabbi Yehuda holding that? Okay, so if it runs away, why is it still kosher, even if it's going to run away? So that's an interesting question. How to explain Rabbi Yehuda. Now, in any event, however you want to explain, I mean, I guess you have to explain that. Who says there has to be a gzeira? Like, who says the rabbis had to make a decree? If it runs away, well, the person will see. He'll build himself another wall or something. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. How does Rabbi Yehuda understand? Why would Rabbi Yehuda argue on that? But anyway, the Gemara now gets into a different issue. The issue is that the way Abaye explained it, the Reb Meir is nervous the animal's going to die. Rabbi Yehuda argues on Rabbi. Rabbi Yehuda says we're not afraid. This is very understandable why Rabbi Yehuda would feel that way. But the Gemara has a problem now, because if you look through the entire Shas, and as Mordechai brought up, you will find cases where the rabbis do argue about these type of scenarios. Do we have to be concerned? Mordechai brought a case about on Yom Kippur, where the Kohen Gadol needs to be married in order to do the service on Yom Kippur. A Kohen Gadol has to have a wife. There's no, he's not able to do the service if he's not married. And they learn it from a verse. And if he's not, so the Mishnah says they would arrange for a substitute wife in case his wife passes away, because he needs to be married, So the question is, are we concerned do we always take such considerations that someone's going to die? Another question. A person is a kohen, and he goes on a long trip on a boat. And is his wife allowed to eat truma? His wife is not she's married to a kohen, so she's normally allowed to eat truma, the certain tithings that were given to the kohen to eat, and she's allowed to, being one of the household members, being the wife, and she would be allowed to eat truma. But if the husband passes away, she is no longer going to be able to eat truma if they don't have kids. So the question would be, or does it not matter if they have kids? If she's a bas kohen and there are no kids, then maybe it doesn't matter actually. I have to look it up if anyway, she's married to a kohen. And the thing is, if the kohen dies, she's not going to be allowed to eat truma anymore. Does she have to stop eating truma because the husband went on a boat ride on a ship and dangerous, traveling far across the ocean? Does she have to be nervous? So that's another case where you find such a thing.
Don't you say the same thing by an animal? Since the animal, the normal thing is that the animal's not going to die. It's not common that the animal's going to die every day.
So these are cases, right? So we have to compare these rules. We have to compare all these different cases. There's a case also where someone gives his wife a divorce, and he tells her that this is a divorce because I might be traveling, I might not be available, and if you don't get a divorce from me and I pass away, you're going to be stuck. We don't have any kids, and you're going to be obligated to marry my brother. And you'll never, where are you going to find him? We don't have telephones. You're going to be stuck not being married. And so he hands her a divorce and says, listen, the divorce is not, this divorce is on condition. It's not the real divorce now. It should take effect a moment before I die. So this way, when she dies, is she a married woman? No, because she's divorced. She's a divorcee. Is she a divorcee right now? No, she's not a divorcee right now. It's only taking effect a moment before the man dies, the husband dies. And the benefit of it, of course, is that she is then going to be free to be married, to marry anyone she wants. And she's not going to be subject to doing chalitza or yibum to marry the husband's brother because she doesn't have kids. They didn't have any kids together. So then she would be stuck finding him, and she wouldn't be allowed to marry anyone until she finds him. So the case is that she has a divorce that's not yet it's not yet active. It's not activated, the divorce. But the problem is, what happens if the husband is far away? So is she considered married? Do we have to be concerned that he might have died? So these are some of the cases here that we're going to bring. Okay, so let's go through the next Gemara. We're on page 23b, top of the page, 23b. We're going to start from the top line, umi. So the Gemara says, "Umi Amar Abaye Reb Meir Chayish L'Misa Reb Yehuda LeChayish." Is it true? Did Abaye say that Reb Meir is the one who's concerned about Misa? That he always takes into consideration maybe the person died, and you have to be careful, you have to be concerned. Reb Yehuda LeChayish, and Reb Yehuda is the one who's not concerned. He doesn't take that into consideration. Is that true? V'hatanan, didn't we learn in a Mishnah? Bas Yisrael, a woman who's not a Bas Kohen, she's not a daughter of a Kohen, she's a Bas Yisrael, a daughter of a regular Israelite. Shenises la Kohen. She was married, or she is married, to a Kohen. So she's married to a Kohen, and she's allowed to eat truma. V'halach baila lemdinas hayom. The husband took a long trip. He took a trip to another country. And because he took a trip, a far away trip, we can't reach him. We don't know if he made it there. So the law is, the Mishnah says, she could still eat truma b'cheskas shu kayam, assuming that he is alive. So the case is actually, just to clarify. So what I mentioned was correct, that if she does have kids, so from him, so she would be allowed to eat truma even after. But the issue is that does she have to be concerned to that she's that he, if they don't have kids, does she have to be concerned that he died? And the answer is that that no, she's allowed to eat truma. Now, v'raminon Allah, and we asked a contradiction about this from a brisa. So that was a Mishnah. Then there's a brisa that says that the man gives his wife a divorce, and he says this divorce should be enforced, should be valid, but be considered to be given to you a sha'a achas. Sha'a achas could mean 1 moment or 1 hour, a moment before he passes away. And the point is that he's trying to get out of having her, trying to do her a favor. And the favor that he's doing her, she won't have to do yibum or chalitza. She won't have to marry the husband, his brother. So what is he doing? He gives her a get that shouldn't take effect until a moment before he dies. In this way, she will, when he dies, she won't be considered a widow. She'll be considered a divorcee. And the benefit of that is that she could marry anyone. However, she can't marry a kohen. So there is a benefit not doing this trick, and that is that she would then be allowed to marry a kohen if her husband has no brothers. But in the case where her husband has brothers, she anyway won't be allowed to marry a kohen, because she'll do chalitza to the husband's brother, and she won't be allowed to marry a kohen anyway. So the point is that this is a benefit for the wife, a complete benefit for the wife, that she'll be considered a divorcee and she won't be considered a widow. Now,
interesting.
Now the Gemara brings this brisa. So what does the brisa say? So he gave her this get, and it says asura lechol betruma miyad. She immediately is prohibited from eating truma right away, because we're afraid that he might die in a moment from now. And this is, the get will be active a moment before the death. And so therefore, every moment we have to be concerned. And so she would then be prohibited in truma at all times, immediately. Now, the Gemara says, "V'amar Abaye," and Abaye mentioned this contradiction, and he said, "You know how to answer this?" Abaye says it's like kasha. It's not a problem. It's not a contradiction. Why? Because Reb Meir, this Mishnah that says that she's permitted to eat truma even though the husband took a long trip. This is Reb Meir, who is not concerned about death. The brisa that says once he gives her a divorce, that's going to take effect a moment before the death. So we're always afraid that in a moment from now he's going to die, and she no longer would be allowed to eat truma. So the brisa is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda the chayesh lamisa. This brisa follows Rabbi Yehuda's view that we are concerned about death. Now, where does Abaye get this idea from? So he's Tanya, because it was taught in a brisa, halokeach yayin mibein hakutim, when a person buys wine from amongst the kutim were this nation that came into Eretz Yisrael. They came to Israel after the 10 tribes were exiled, and they were brought from a place called Kuta. The bottom line was that there was a whole plague of lions at Eretz Yisrael, and it was eating and devouring these people. And they realized, they said, we must convert to Judaism, and otherwise the lions are going to continue eating us up. And so they decided to convert. And there's a whole question in the Gemara and the Mishnayos, if these people from Kuta, were they considered true converts, or were they considered Geirei Arayos? Were they considered converts because of the lions? Meaning, when they decided to convert, did they actually do it sincerely or not?
Rabbi, the English here is calling them the Samaritans.
Samaritans.
They don't have a good reputation anyways, from what I understand.
Yeah, but it's interesting that right in America that the word Samaritan normally means like a good Samaritan. No, it's normally like something positive. But no, it's not. Samaritan normally means something negative.
No, in America it is.
In America it does.
Amongst
here,
us,
yeah. I don't know why. Right. Yeah, I don't know why they got that name, but in any event, maybe because they lived in Shomron, so Samaritan would be from the Shomron. Maybe that's where they lived. I don't know. But I don't know if that's connected to the word Samaritan. But what would the Hebrew equivalent be? But in any event, the brisa here that we're talking about, the Kutim, it's following the view that the Kutim were Jewish. The Kutim were Jewish. Now, happens to be that they weren't so careful on tithing. They weren't careful at all. They didn't give their tithings to the Kohen. Now, so we would be allowed to drink their wine, but we're not allowed, but we have to tithe it. And so that's the story about the Kutim. Of course, there's a discussion here. Tosfos has a whole discussion here about were they not trustworthy on their own tithing, or when they sold stuff they didn't tithe it? You know, was that the issue? But Rashi seems to learn that they didn't do tithings, and even on their own stuff. And this is before the rabbis made a final decision, a verdict about the Kutim, that we don't consider them Jewish. Before that final verdict, there were brises, rabbis of the Talmud, of the Mishnah, in that time, that held that they were kosher, they were Jewish. So basically, the brisa says that a person who buys wine, person buys wine from the Kutim. So Omer, he has the option to the case. One of the cases that this could be talking about is he bought wine from them, and he has a problem. That he can't separate the wine. Why can't he separate the tithings now? Because he bought it was right before Shabbos, and Shabbos came, and so he can't actually, you're not allowed to separate. It's called tikkun keli. It's considered like fixing something if you do the tithings on Shabbos. So therefore, he has an option here to say a certain prayer, a certain wording that allows him to take the tithings later, and he could eat the food, drink the wine now. So Omer, he says, Shnei Lugin Shani Yasid Lahafish, he says, I bought 100 barrels, or 100 lugs, I should say. Let's say a lug is, so let's say it's maybe a liter. So I bought 100 liters. So the 2 of the liters that I'm going to separate after Shabbos, that will be Harei Hein Truma. Those are going to be Truma. And Asara, 10, then I'm going to have 98 left. And then from the 98, approximately 100, I'm going to take 10 as the tithing for the Levite, for the Meiser Rishon. Asara is Meiser Rishon. 10 of them are going to be that I'm going to separate in the future. In other words, after Shabbos, those will be used for Meiser Rishon. And then I'm going to have approximately 90 left. And from the 90 left, I have to take Meiser Sheni. Tisha, 9 of them are Meiser Sheni. They will be, that they are considered Meiser Sheni. And Umeichel, and I am exchanging the Meiser Sheni to money that's in my house. I'm putting the holiness of the Meiser Sheni onto the money, and now they are no longer considered part of the second tithes. They are exchanged, they're redeemed. I've redeemed them on money, and you redeem them onto money, and then you would be allowed to drink the wine now on Shabbos. The shoyse miyad, could drink the wine immediately.
But he's doing this right before Shabbat. He's not doing it on Shabbat. He's doing it the Erev Shabbat. Let's say he doesn't have enough time.
Even on Shabbos. On Shabbos, he's saying this wording. You didn't have time to do it before Shabbos. He just was lucky to make it home
But he would be permitted to do this on Shabbat, even though
because he's not actually separating it now. He's gonna separate it after. It's an interesting scenario where, but he's not really doing the separation now. He's saying, I'm gonna separate it after Shabbos, and so there's a concept of yesh breira. You're allowed to choose later, and it goes retroactively, and ultimately he's able to drink the wine on Shabbos. So Rashi says, "Kugoin shehigia lel Shabbos." The first case that Rashi gives is this. This is the case. It's Shabbos. Tosfos actually says it can't be on. It's not on Shabbos. It's bein hashmashas. That's the way Tosfos learns. But Rashi learns that it's on Shabbos. Rashi gives another example. He might not have vessel. Maybe it's not Shabbos. It's a different issue. He wants to drink the wine, but he doesn't have any kalim that are tahor. He doesn't have any pure kalim to put the truma and meiser in. So therefore, he wants to drink it now, and he'll deal. That's a second option. Another example that Rashi gives of where this person needs to do it in a rush without being able to separate it. So he has this formula of doing this the separation later, and it works retroactively. Now, Rashi does also mention, it says what you see here is that the Kutim had a bigger problem than the regular Am Ha'aretz. In other words, regular Am Ha'aretz, a regular person who we were concerned that they weren't so religious and they didn't take the mice, they didn't know so much, or they didn't care, they weren't so careful about things. Those people, we also used to take truma, we would take meiser afterwards. We would buy stuff from them, and they were Jewish, and they kept some of the laws, but they weren't so careful. The people called the Amei Haaretz, we were always concerned that they weren't careful enough in these areas of separating. So those people, we were only concerned about maybe they didn't take, they might have taken Truma Meiser, they might have taken all the tithings, and we were concerned maybe they didn't take Meiser. Actually, Truma, we knew they took. We were nervous that they didn't take Meiser. So that's called Demai. Here with the Kutim, we knew they didn't take it. It was more like a definite. It was a definite by Amei Haaretz. There were different laws, because the Amei Haaretz, but literally, Amei Haaretz meant the ignorant people, but it didn't just mean the ignorant people. It meant people who didn't act in more religious style. Those type of people, they weren't called chaverim. So for them, whenever we bought stuff from them, we would be concerned. With the Kutim, we were more like it was definite. Anyway, so that's Rashi just mentions that. So so that's the law with the Meiser. Now, Divrei Reb Meir, this is the words of Reb Meir, and Reb Meir basically holds that you could do the Breira, you could choose later, and it'll work retroactively, that this was the Meiser, now the problem is, are you considered to have eaten food that had Truma in it that wasn't tithe? And the answer is no, because afterwards you're going to separate Truma, separate the first tithing that goes to the Kohen, first separation. It's not a tithing because it's not 1/10, it's 1/50th, or 1/40th, or 1/60th, depending on how much you want to give. But it's not exactly a tithe. but it's a separation. So the truma went to the kohen. So the thing is, you're going to separate it later, and we're going to consider that what you drank had no truma or meiser in what you drank. So we're going to use the rule of Brera that you could choose later, and it works retroactively. Now that was the opinion of Reb Meir. Divrei Reb Meir. These are the words of Reb Meir. We turn the page now. We're up to page 24a, and Reb Yehuda, Reb Yosi, Reb Shimon Oisrim. These other rabbis say you can't do that. And the reason why they say you can't do that is we're afraid it's going to break and you won't be able to separate it later. And turns out that you drank tevel, you drank wine that never was separated, that the tithings were not separated. Anyway, bottom line is Reb Meir concerned that the jar, that the barrel is going to break? No. He says you're allowed to do this thing. He's not concerned. So the Gemara uses this, the opinion of Abaye. Abaye says, what do you see from this whole brisa? You see that Reb Meir is very not nervous of things going awry. You know, the person's not going to die. The person's not here. You see, we're not afraid it's going to break. Now the other rabbis are Reb Yehuda, Reb Yosef, Reb Shimon. They're oisrim. They prohibited Shema Yibaka Hanoid is the term. We're afraid the flask is going to crack. It's going to break, and you won't be able to actually tithe. So Reb Yehuda is one of the rabbis that's nervous, but Reb Meir is not nervous. So Abaye says, so we could say the same thing is the other Mishnah and Brisa that we see a contradiction. Let's say that one of the opinions is Reb Meir, and the other opinion is Reb Yehuda. So we have a case where we're afraid someone's going to die, and the other Brisa, we're not of the Mishnah, we're not afraid that the person's going to die. The Brisa, we are afraid that the person's going to die, and she can't eat truma at all. She has to stop eating truma. So let's say that the one that we're concerned is Reb Yehuda. The case where we're not concerned someone's going to die, that is Reb Meir. And what does this have to do with our Gemara talking about the laws of Sukkah? It goes back to the discussion of a Sukkah that has an animal that's used as a wall. Are we concerned there that the animal is going to die? And we have Abaye who says that Reb Meir is concerned the animal is going to die. So we're going to get to that in a moment. So, or actually, this is the conclusion of the question. Really, the question ends here at the word oisrin. Yeah. So it says Reb Yehuda, Reb Yosef, Reb Shimon oisrin, and the Gemara is asking this question. In other words, you really have to read it a little more in a flow. The Gemara started on the top of page 23b, and it said, does Abaye really hold that Reb Meir is the one who's concerned about death and Reb Yehuda is not concerned about death? We have a Mishnah and a Brisa that contradicted each other, and Abaye is the one who said that Reb Meir is the one who's not concerned about death in order to answer the Mishnah and the Brisa. And the Reb Meir and Abaye's proof was the Brisa that talked about the kutim wine, that there Reb Meir is not concerned about the barrel breaking. So what comes out is, how does Abaye say in our Gemara that Reb Meir is the one who's concerned, that Reb Meir is concerned that Shema Yamos, the animal might die, and therefore you can't use an animal as a wall for a sukkah? We see that Reb Meir is the one who's always relaxed. He's never nervous about death, about the barrel breaking. So how could Reb Meir hold one place one thing and the other place another thing? And it's really a contradiction in Abaye's own words. Abaye is the source of all of this problem. Here he says Reb Meir is concerned. In all those cases, he says clearly Reb Meir is not concerned. So the Gemara says epoch, a one-word answer. You have to say that it's the opposite. Reb Meir is the one chayish. Reb Meir chayish lemisa, Reb Yehuda le chayish lemisa. It's exactly the opposite. Reb Meir, based on our Gemara, Reb Meir, that Abaye explains, Reb Meir is concerned about the death of the animal. So Reb Meir is the one who's always concerned about death, and we have the Mishnah and the Brisa. One of them is more concerned that one of them is concerned that the person will die, and the other one is not concerned that the person will die. Reb Meir is the one who's concerned the person will die, and that was the Brisa. And the Mishnah that was not concerned the person's going to die. The man took a travel to another country, and the wife is not a kohenes. She's married to a kohen. She's allowed to eat truma. We're not afraid. That's Reb Yehuda. Reb Meir is the one who's concerned about death, and that's the brisa that talks about a person giving a divorce to his wife a moment before death. We consider them divorced. We're nervous that they're divorced now because he might have a heart attack in a minute, and therefore we got to be concerned he's going to die, and therefore she should not be eating truma now. Because she might, if he has a heart attack in a minute, she's allowed to eat truma now. But because he gave her a divorce, and divorce takes effect a moment before the death, now we have to be concerned that she is a divorcee and cannot eat truma. So that's the Gemara's answer at this point. So. What is Reb Meir's, what is Abaye's source that Reb Meir is the one who's concerned about death? Again, we had a contradiction, Mishnah and a Brisa, and Abaye says, you know what the answer is? One is Reb Meir, one is Reb Yehuda, and that's it. You can't just answer something like that. You got to have a little source. You have to do your research. Why do you think Reb Meir holds that you're more concerned about death and Reb Yehuda is not concerned about death? Where do you come up with this? Very nice. You jump. Oh, we have a contradiction. No problem. Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda. Okay, we can go to recess. There's no sense. You have to have a source. You have to have a reason why Reb Meir. So the Gemara says, you know what the source of Abaye is? How does he just answer a question? This is Reb Meir, this is Reb Yehuda, because of our brisa that we learned about an animal that's used as a wall for a sukkah. The Tanya and the proof of that Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda both hold their view is from this brisa. Also, if a person made a wall for the sukkah from an animal, used an animal as the wall. So Reb Meir Paisel, Reb Yehuda Machshir. Reb Meir says it's invalid. Why does he say it's invalid? You know why? Because we're concerned about the death of the animal. And Reb Yehuda says it's kosher because we are not concerned, we're not worried about death. So according to this, we can answer the Brisa and the Mishnah that contradicted each other, that one is following Reb Yehuda's view, and the other one is following Reb Meir's view.
Right? How common is it that was it the Baraita that he's reversing the? How common is it that somebody's saying, "Oh, that quote from the Baraita was misquoted"? How does that happen often?
So it's not really that the Brisa is misquoted, because the Brisa in the Mishnah, neither of them said any names.
Okay.
So we had a contradiction of Mishnah and a Brisa, and Abaye made an announcement, I have an answer to this problem. One is Rava, one's Abaye, right? And the understanding we had that his answer, that's what we're changing now and saying, no. He wasn't saying one is that this one is that. It's the opposite. Reb Meir is that view and Reb Yehuda is that view. We just switched the answer of his that it's not that what he was saying was that this rabbi is this view and that rabbi is that view. We switched it. No, it's actually the opposite.
So and that happens. That happens every once in a while, and
yeah, especially there are times, and the truth is that the sometimes in a Mishnah itself we say epoch, or a brisa itself we will say epoch, that it must be that the views got confused, and really this view is really the other one, and that in order to answer contradictions, it just can't be that there must have been some mistake that got mixed into the into our tradition, and we have to reconcile it by saying it must be that the other rabbi is the name, and goes there. But in any event, this case is not really such a surprising case, because basically Abaye just says that Abaye gave an answer. And so obviously we must have misquoted Abaye's answer, especially because Abaye himself says clearly the opposite in our Gemara. So how could Abaye have said one? It must have been when he said that difference that whoever listened thought that they were hearing it one way, and really it was Abaye had said it the opposite. It was really the opposite way. Okay, so anyway, so that's now the Gemara is not satisfied, because we still have a problem that the problem that we have is the brisa that we thought he brought as a proof. See, we mentioned Reb Meir differentiated the Mishnah, the brisa, Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda, and then we said, where his source is? From a brisa. We brought a brisa that seemed to prove the original way of thinking, which was a brisa about the kutim. And what did it say in that brisa? That there was an argument, Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. And so in that brisa, we clearly see that Reb Meir is not concerned about the breaking of the barrel. So that's where we're stuck now. In other words, we can answer Abaye and say it's not a problem. Abaye holds that Reb Meir is always chayesh lemisa. Reb Meir is always overly concerned. Someone might die, something might happen. Fine. He's concerned, and therefore we have to take extra precaution. And so that's Abaye, that's Reb Meir's view all over. So fine. And Reb Yehuda's is more relaxed. That we can answer, and we could say epoch, that when we thought Abaye said it, that this is the reconciliation, it's really the opposite. It's really Reb Meir is the one who's more concerned and takes precautions, and Reb Yehuda's the other. Problem is that there's a brisa that we thought he was relying on, and that brisa implies like the original way we wanted to explain. And that brisa says clearly that Reb Meir is not concerned that the barrel is going to break. And therefore, Reb Meir says, you know what? You want to separate the meiser on Shabbos? You could do it. You say it in a certain way. You say this formula, and you separate. Well, you're separating really after Shabbos, but you're saying the formula on Shabbos, and it's actually going to be kosher. It's going to be fine. You're afraid the barrel's going to be, barrel's not going to. I'm not afraid. So Reb Meir allows it. He's not afraid that the barrel's going to break. We just said Reb Meir is always precautious, and he's always taking precautions. And Reb Yehuda is here. We have Reb Yehuda is concerned that the barrel's going to break. What about all the other cases? He's not concerned that the person's going to die. So why is he concerned? So it seems like it's a contradiction. Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. So what does the Gemara answer? So the Gemara says, Kasha de Reb Meir ad Reb Meir. So this is a contradiction. Reb Meir ad Reb Meir. Amalach Reb Meir. So Reb Meir will answer you that Misa Shchicha B'kiyas Hanoid Lo Shchicha. It's death is common, but the breaking of a barrel, that's not so common. Why? Efsher the Masar Le Lo Shomer. Possible that I'll give it to someone who's going to watch it. It's not going to break. He's going to be careful about it. So there's reason to the nose. You can't protect yourself from death. It's the angel comes and it's too late. but to protect the barrel from breaking, that you could take steps to protect it. You gave it to a shomer. You were extra careful about it, and therefore it would be something that Reb Meir is not concerned about. Now the Gemara says, what about the contradiction of Reb Yehuda? Because all the other cases we found that Reb Yehuda he's not concerned about death, and all of a sudden here he's concerned that the barrel is going to break. And so this is a contradiction. If Reb Yehuda is always so relaxed, why is he all of a sudden here, this Brisa, nervous with the buying the wine from the kuti, and you hold you can't drink it. You want to drink it right away? Too bad, you can't. Why? Because you want to try to do the separations later. The barrel might break. You won't have wine to do the separations. You have to do separations from the actual wine itself. You can't just use give some charity later or something like that. That doesn't work. You have to actually take it. If this barrel breaks, you're gonna be out of luck retroactively. You'll have drank wine that was tevel, that was untithed. So Rabbi Yehuda is concerned here, but he's not concerned in all the other cases. So Talmud Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, you know what the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? So it's Kasha Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara answers Talmud Rabbi Yehuda. The reason of Rabbi Yehuda is really a different reason. It's not because he's concerned about the barrel breaking. No, that's not an issue. The barrel gonna break. He's not concerned. I'm never concerned about things. No, Rabbi Yehuda is not concerned. He says, but I hold that you can't say breira. You can't use this concept, which we didn't really go into much, but we just said that it works in a retroactive way. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't agree with this idea. So time with Rabbi Yehuda, lav mishum d'chaysh l'b'kiyas. I know he's not because he's afraid of the barrel's going to break. Ela mishum d'lesle breira. He doesn't hold of this concept called breira, where you can choose something and later, and we allow it to work retroactively. He doesn't hold of such a thing. And therefore, when you're going to choose later what is the meiser, what is considered the tithing, and what isn't, it's too bad. When you drank the wine now, your wine that you drank was it was wine that was untithed. What do you mean? I'm going to tithe it later. Yeah, what you tithe later is very nice, but it doesn't work retroactively. You can't choose later something and say, well, it was considered that it was chosen originally. You can't do that. He doesn't hold that you could do such a thing called breira and choose it later and make it as if I drank kosher stuff now. It was already tithed. No, it wasn't tithed. You drank untithed wine. Later on, you tithed the whatever was left. But you can't tithe it later and say it was considered like it's tithed retroactively. So Elamishum de lesle breira. He holds you don't say this concept of breira, and you can't do that. And therefore, you prohibit to drink any of the wine until you actually go and separate the tithings. Okay, we're going to stop here.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi, thank you.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.